Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to BPCA webinar on squirrel control today. Can't believe it's that time of year when we're having to consider the control of squirrels, getting into the autumn time, getting a bit cooler. So yeah, time flies when you're having fun or not for some. Yeah, welcome today. We've got 155, 156 people on at the moment. I think as the minutes go by, we maybe get a few more. So yeah, thank you for joining us today. I know you guys are all really, really busy and, you're out there. Some of you might be in your van watching this, having your lunch, or in your office. Hopefully not up in an attic, hiding away anywhere or anything like that on your phone. But yeah, as long as you're safe and you can concentrate, that'd be great. Some great CPD points as well. We've got one today. So for every hour of training or learning that you do, you're going to get 1 point for that. So today's an hour. And because of that hour as well, we've got a lot to get through. Squirrels is a big subject. So hopefully I'll get through that efficiently and effectively for you. I'm obviously not going to be able to cover every single thing that there is out there to know and learn about squirrels, but certainly the most important things that you need to know while you're out and about and dealing with these problems on the go. So yeah, one CPD point. A couple of you already put some comments on this. So we've got a Q&A section. Some of you are really familiar with these webinars, so sorry if it's a bit repetitive for you, but for anybody that's new, we've got a Q&A button. Depending on what device you're on, it might be at the bottom or at the side, and that's where I want you to put any questions that you've got. Now, the really important thing about questions, sometimes when I do these webinars, I'll do the first half and then have a break for questions and then continue on and do some questions at the end. Whereas I think today we've got a lot to get through, and also sometimes questions come through that actually I cover in the webinar a bit later on. So yeah, maybe if you've got any questions, note them down on a bit of paper, and then we'll get towards the end. If I haven't sort of covered the question that you've got, then yeah, put it on there and we can get some answered. It'd be great. And also, sharing your experiences. If we talk about anything here and you think you've got something you'd like to share with the group, if we've got some time, absolutely, I'd like to read those out. So yeah, so Q&A section, questions about the webinar, anything you've got for me that you want me to elaborate on in the Q&A section. Any technical issues, please put it in the chat box there. I've got one of my colleagues just keeping an eye on any technical issues. So I'm just having a look. I think you can all hear me okay. Let me check the chat section there. Good afternoon, yep. Oh yeah, so my name's not Karen actually. I need to change that, don't I? Let me do that for you, just one moment. So yes, my name's Natalie Bungay. Sorry about that. Let me rename myself. For some reason, I can't seem to do that on here. But yeah, any technical issues that you do have with the webinar today, get it in that chat section. I've had Roland, thank you. You can hear me well, so hopefully everybody else can. So apologies, yeah, my name's not Karen. I haven't managed to change it, and you know what? I'm not going to worry about it. My name's Natalie. Some of you will know me, some of you won't. But by all means, call me Karen. I'll answer to most things. So yeah, chat section questions, any technical problems, and Q&A for any questions about the webinar. And at the end, I'll go through those, and hopefully if the things that again I haven't answered, then we can have a look at that. I can't hear you, of course. Only in the chat section and Q&A section can I see what you guys are saying or what you're asking. And yeah, as I said, so what you're going to get out of today. I mentioned at the beginning that it's big subject, squirrels. A lot of pests are anyway, and we've got an hour webinar here, and there's only so much I can go through. So my aim really was to, try and make this useful for new people to the industry. Some of it will be brand new information, maybe all of it will be brand new information to you. But for you, those of you that are a bit more experienced, it's kind of an update, a reminder of things, a confirmation as we go into that season of squirrel control, where you're going to get customers calling about them. It just gives you that kind of confirmation of, oh yeah, that's what I thought, or oh actually that's a new bit of information for me. I'll go and research it, or give us a call and we can have a chat about it a little bit more. Okay, it's quite funny today. I tried to think of things that maybe could make you laugh, come up with some puns or something, but they're all just too nutty, so I just decided not to. So yeah, why don't we just get on with the webinar? So again, I'm going to do different things. I'm going to be sharing a screen here. So again, keep me updated if there's any problems. As I said, I've got a colleague of mine on my phone here who's going to let me know. So yeah, let's see how we get on, shall we? Okay, so you all should be able to see the front screen that you all saw when you first logged on. And I'm going to go on to just the agenda slide. So just to go over again a bit of what we're going to cover, let it settle a little bit so you guys can see that I'm there. Computer's thinking about it. It's got that twirly little. Okay. And on that, with technical issues as well, if I have any major issues and I suddenly disappear or I stop talking or I kind of in this kind of action for far too many minutes and you think Natalie must have frozen, then please just bear with me. My computer is doing something right now. That's why I gave you that update then, because I knew something was about to happen. It's just restarting. But yeah, so for any of you that are new to the industry, any questions that you've got, please don't ever, even if you're not new to the industry, any questions that you've got, don't ever think that they're silly questions or basic questions, because if it's something that you're not aware of or you're not confident with, then absolutely you've got to ask it and make sure you are confident with it. Now, okay, kept myself going quite well with that, didn't I? Were you quite impressed? Okay, so I haven't got any messages from my colleague who's keeping an eye on things for me saying that there's any massive issues. So I believe you should be able to see the main first screen, and you should now be able to see the agenda as well. Oh, blimey. But yes, as I said, no question is a silly question. You can either put your name to it or you can be anonymous. It's completely up to you. If you do put your name to any questions, I will read it out. So I'll make an assumption you're okay with that if you do put your name in there. But yeah, so today's agenda then, we're going to do a bit of basic biology. As I said, we can't spend too much time on each section. We've got to kind of try and weigh up which ones are going to be the most important to you. So of course, some basic biology, just a bit of a reminder on, where they are, why they're there, and in how many numbers, the basic stuff that keeps you ticking over, and you can research a bit more if need be. And then, so I think, the importance of control, the legislation and the options for control are going to be the most important bits for you when you're in the field, making decisions on the go. You've got customers talking to you who are asking you questions, and hopefully these last three bits here are going to be the items that you're going to find hopefully most useful. And maybe most of the questions will come out of that as well. So yeah, without further ado then. But first, of course, I have to remind you, red squirrels, they're not only protected, but of course, we all love to see red squirrels. I think I've only come across one or two in my time when I've been up into Scotland, into the broadleaf wooded areas of which they are quite common in. And yeah, to get a sight on them is quite a special thing. So yeah, they are protected by the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981. So we absolutely, if you are doing any grey squirrel work in any area where there's a potential for red squirrels, then you're going to need to do yourself a very thorough environmental risk assessment. That is, sorry, my computer was going a bit strange there. Oh, Kat, I can see you, Kat, on there. I don't know why. Okay, so anyway, so carry on. So yes, red squirrels are protected, and it's something that we need to remember. There's a few maps there just to give a bit of an indication with regard to the distribution of grey squirrels, red squirrels, and in some areas there are no squirrels at all, as you can see there at the top of Scotland. This was a map in 2010, so I don't doubt that over the last 10 years there's been, a much more wider distribution of grey squirrels. But yeah, just an idea of where they are. As I said, from 1945, we had a very, particularly small population of grey squirrels. Of course, starting in the southern areas, we're always to blame, as southerners, aren't we? Rightly so. And yeah, just spread up through, through the country. So interesting to see that. So they're protected. Just remember that. So yeah, a bit of biology then. They're diurnal, meaning the opposite of nocturnal. They're active during the day predominantly, and we'll all know, we'll see them. That's when we predominantly see them. And they're not necessarily territorial, but in fact sometimes they share their home ranges and, you know, temporarily abundant foods. When you get food there, they will actually share it. So yeah, they're not particularly territorial like some animals can be. And you know, they are dependent upon, you know, large seeds such as, you know, trees as oak and beech and hazel, chestnut and things like that. In autumn, which is the time now, these are abundant. This food source is really, really abundant, and you know, they'll forage them on the ground. And I think you'll possibly notice, I certainly have with my terrier dog when I'm out walking, you know, getting a scent of those squirrels a lot more and running after them, you know, kind of chasing that scent. And that's because the squirrels are on the ground a lot more this time of year because of, you know, the leaves are falling, the seeds and the nuts are falling to the ground. The squirrels are then taking advantage of that abundance and seeking them out. So yeah, there's going to be a lot more activity of squirrels, possibly in people's gardens, on the ground level, and certainly in woodlands, in broad-leafed woodland areas where they're most common. So yeah, we have certainly seen that. Perfect time of year for that to occur. Generally, I think in captivity, grey squirrels have been known to live up to 20 years. You know, as most animals in captivity, they're always going to, you know, live a lot longer. Whereas in the wild, generally 5 to 7 years is the average that you'll get for an adult squirrel. They're a fairly big size. Again, you know, with sizes of, you know, the length of them, the weight of them, the litter size, you know, anything to do with any mammal, it's always going to vary depending on, you know, environment and the weather, the abundance of food, you know, shelter. I think all these things will affect the biology or the breeding or the weight of, you know, an individual mammal. But just as a guide, as I said, there's a few bits listed down there. You know, average weight of 500 grams. You know, they nest in drays, which we know, we've seen them similar to birds' nest really in trees, don't they, to be honest? But you know, that's where their home range would be, and it's during the colder weather when, you know, might get a bit chilly up in the trees there, and they'll possibly come into homes. So, but we'll go a bit on to importance and how they cause us a problem later on. They usually have 2 litters per annum. Now, you know, again, this is, you know, they may have 3, they may have 4, they may have 1, but generally, you know, March, April time, maybe August, September or October time, they'll have their litters. Again, that's a general rule of thumb, but of course, if, you know, if the weather permits and there's an abundance of food and they've got amazing harbourage, then maybe a little bit more than that. And gestation, in terms of female, how long she's pregnant for is about 44 days, 45 days, and they take about 10 weeks to wean as well. So yeah, you know, it's not a really quick life cycle. We can look at some, you know, like mice, you know, they've got a very quick, you know, life cycle, and they can, you know, sort of kick out a lot of young in a very short period of time. So, but yeah, with squirrels, they, of course, you know, it's important to know a bit about their biology and their breeding, but you know, as you can see, here's a few bits and pieces for you. And after about 1 year is usually when they're ready to, I think I've missed out some words there, apologies. That's when they're usually ready to mate themselves. So a female will be ready at about 1 year old to, you know, reproduce herself. And the main predators of grey squirrels are actually things like stoats, goshawks and foxes, things like that. That'll be their predator, and of course humans. You know, I think we're a predator of most animals, aren't we? So, but yeah, again, with litter size, like I said, you know, it can exceed 2 per year. The kittens that are within that can exceed 5, because generally it's about 5 kittens that they'll have in each brood, but that could be less, it could be more. It really depends on their environment and how efficient they've been at getting their food source. Okay, so I think we're all okay to carry on. So that is very little bit about biology. I'm not going to go into too much more on that. If you've got any more questions you want to know about the way squirrels, you know, move themselves around, or the way that they work, then please put some questions in there, and we'll see if we can get them answered for you. But yeah, just a few, you know, interesting bits here. You know, they're a buck and a doe, the male and the female. The male being a buck and the female being a doe. Similar to deers, you know, it's a similar names there. Can be right or left-handed, but certainly these last 2 here, they're, you know, we've seen them hanging upside down, and, you know, possibly some of you might have seen them swim. I don't think I have, but yeah, they can swim if need be. And they're actually introduced, rather than an interesting did you know, probably quite an important bit, this is, they're introduced into the UK sort of, periodically over a period of, sort of 40, 50 years, back in the late 1800s. And they, again, started in the southern area of the country, as you could see from that distribution map, introduced to sort of Surrey, Sussex areas, and just spread through. And the reason for that, to be honest with you, why do we do lots of things? But I think they have originated from US and Canada, and certainly Northern America, and of course, we just liked them and thought, yeah, they'd be great to have in this country, but we didn't necessarily consider invasive or alien species as much as we should have done, and actually thought they could have a real impact on our native environments and organisms. So yeah, just some important bits there. Okay, so yeah, importance as pests. So this bit, when you're any pest, whether it's an insect or a rodent or other mammal or wildlife, when you have a customer that rings you, it's really important that you understand the reasons why you've got to do it, and especially with squirrels, because they can be an emotive pest. They can be a pest that some people just do not want to see gone from our environment. And do you know what? That's not actually our aim anyway. Grey squirrels, I think it'd be impossible to say that they're going to be gone from our country at some point, and we don't necessarily want that. It's just the damage that they cause and the problems they cause, and in the numbers that they are, there is control and management that's needed. So knowing the importance of these pests and why we need to do this control, helps you along in your daily job when customers are asking you about it, or you're dealing with squirrels, in one property and the neighbours sticking their head over the fence, maybe not so happy that you're dealing with squirrels. So certainly important to know. So, gardens and allotments, maybe these things are, quite localised and very specific to certain people, but they'll take fruit and raid nests, and also small birds, and they dig holes in your lawn and cause just a bit of chaos, really. But a really, really important one here, and I probably haven't highlighted it in the presentation as much as I should have done, but the damage to forestry, woodlands and parks, and that's the biodiversity impact is what they say. But grey squirrels damage trees by gnawing at the stem to get the sweet sort of sap-filled layers that lay beneath the bark. This is what they want. Sometimes they test trees out. They don't always know whether or not it's got what it wants, so it tests it out, and it can cause damage unnecessarily, i.e. actually it hasn't found that sweet sap they want, and then they move on to the next tree. But that tree that they've tested out has got a form of damage, and it can really, really affect that biodiversity in our woodlands and forests. So the tissue that they have under this bark is responsible for moving all the sugars around the plant and the tree. And this bark stripping occurs usually between late April and the end of July. So we've probably gone through that phase at the moment. And some of you that do maybe a bit more forestry management or wildlife management with people like the Forestry Commission, you may be familiar with these. I've certainly never done too much or any at all really sort of forestry work and dealing with squirrels that are causing this type of damage. It's normally authorities that get in, specific contractors. But certainly well aware of the damage they can cause. Went down to, I think it's Northumberland somewhere, a forestry tourist attraction down there, and they took us around showing the damage that the grey squirrels has done down there. But there's something called the European Squirrel Initiative, and this is the organisation that was based down in this forest. And something that they say is that squirrels have caused irreparable damage to things like conifers and other broadleaf trees such as beech and oak and sycamore. Norway spruce, I think, was another one. And it's cost the British economy about 14 million per annum, according to a study that was published by the International Scientific Organization for DEFRA. So, I'm going into this in a fair bit, but they really do cause a lot of damage to our forests by this bark stripping. As you see, there's a photo there. That's not the only thing they do. They can do it higher up as well. I've seen whole trees stripped of the bark, and this reduces timber quality and also kills the tree as well. So yeah, a real concern to the British, the UK biodiversity. Really important, that bit. This is just a bit of information. The European Squirrel Initiative is a great organisation to go and have a look at if you want to do a bit more reading on it. But they're a registered charity, established in 2002. And the aim of the charity is to safeguard the native European red squirrel that we looked at the beginning, and to protect the natural environment by the removal of the alien American grey squirrel. So yeah, obviously it's a very we had a meeting with them, a year or two ago, and it's a very sensitive subject. As many of these initiatives that want to control them and reduce their numbers, there are probably just as many that are pretty upset that they want to do that, and actually set up organisations to protect the grey squirrel and increase their numbers. So it's a real kind of tug of war there, but really important to protect our native. But yeah, they look into things like the future spread of grey squirrel and how that can affect, and trying to put things in perspective. But yeah, with the grey squirrel, the vulgaris, you can see there, the Squirrus vulgaris. Actually, just a bit of interesting information. You'll notice Vespula vulgaris, the wasp, it's a word or a name, a species name that we've come across before, and it's the Latin adjective of common. So, which is funny, really, with the red squirrel, with it being, having common in its scientific name, whereas actually in this country it's not necessarily so much more common. So hopefully, you never know, European Squirrel Initiative, they might be able to help out with that. Okay, so really important. Spend a bit of time on that, but I think it's important for us to know that, because this doesn't just happen in forests, it can happen in people's gardens, it can happen at the back of their gardens in woodland, and it can be an important reason to control them. But they also raid birds' nests and eggs and fledglings. So of course, our native birds, and can reduce the numbers of birds that are breeding, and possibly conservation status could change because of that. And also, they deprive the British wildlife of food in wild gardens. It might be a bird feeder they're feeding from, or the fruits and the nuts and things that fall from trees, because they're omnivores, similar to other rodents, so rats and mice. They're omnivores as well. They pretty much eat anything. So yeah, they can be a real competition for that. Just an interesting bit with squirrels, so with rats and mice, they're commensal rodents, and that commensal word is basically, in simple terms, they benefit or thrive from the things that humans do. They live from man's table. So the buildings we build, and the waste that we create, and the food that we just haphazardly throw away, they benefit from these things, and they live close to us. Whereas squirrels, they're certainly rodents, but they're not a commensal rodent. They don't generally live close to us, but as we know, they may do on the odd occasion. So another reason we need to deal with them. So of course, our homes, this is probably most of you where you'll get the calls. Most, public health pest controllers, will get calls from customers. They're hearing noises, or they've seen a lot of squirrels in their garden and sort of climbing up the side of their on top of their flat roof, or maybe jumping onto their main roof. And they're just a bit, concerned, obviously, of the impact of them. So, damage once they get into the attic, chewing on woodwork and ceilings. I've seen squirrels chewing through, very soft ceiling fabrics, if you like, to gain access. I think in some schools actually had that, squirrels running around classrooms because they'd chewed a nice hole in the soft ceiling between the attic and obviously the classroom. So yeah, that was interesting. Obviously, they make a mess. They really do make a mess. Certainly if you've got rats in an attic and squirrels in an attic, you can normally tell the difference. Obviously, droppings are slightly different with a tapered end with rats, and squirrels are normally more spherical and round. But the damage they cause, they rip fiberglass up and chew up in all your beams, and yeah, of course, because they're rodents, they have incisors. They also need to keep their teeth at a reasonable length so it doesn't cause them any health problems. And these things, as we know, can cause a lot of chaos. So yeah, contamination will always be a concern as well, not just the damage that they cause. And, sleepless nights, if you've got a squirrel running around in your attic, you're not going to be able to sleep necessarily. Okay, they're diurnal, they're only really active during the day. At nighttime, they're a lot more quiet. But that's not the experience I've always had when they're in a roof. They're still pretty noisy moving around up there. So it can cause, insomnia for some people. And obviously that can then go on to mental health issues. But yeah, the urine and droppings that can, go into water tanks if they're there, and just generally being in your attic. If you've got things stored up there that you're going in and out and, taking things out and putting things in there, and you've got droppings and urine everywhere, it's going to cause a contamination. Of course it is. So a public health risk then, I kind of put a question mark there, because actually if you just take like 10 seconds while I'm talking and think to yourself, actually do they? I've had feedback from various individuals randomly over the years that were saying, well, of course, Salmonella, E. coli, Inval's disease, they say, things like that. But, you will know there's not really any technical manuals out there that really mention public health risks that are associated with squirrels. And I'm not saying that they don't carry any organisms that would be detrimental to us, or that they could, spread things like food poisoning bacteria on our surfaces. Of course they could. Actually, close interaction with any animal is actually not a particularly normal thing for humans to do. I mean, obviously we've got domestic pets and we screen them as such, but this is where a lot of viruses and health conditions can come from, because we implant ourselves into environments where there are animals. Okay, we're talking about squirrels now, but you're talking about the Congo or something. You go into the middle of there where you've never been before, and there's a good chance you're going to bring out some viruses that we've never seen before. And obviously that's quite a relevant thing at the moment, isn't it? With regards to that, we're very we like to kind of get in there and disrupt things, and that can really cause us problems. So yeah, I'm not saying that they couldn't. However, generally they're not associated with public health risks. And I mentioned about them not being a commensal rodent. They don't live particularly close to us. So again, that interaction with them is relatively minimal, whereas rats and mice, they appear in our environment. They might run across your desk or your tables or your work surfaces a lot more than, say, squirrels would do. And also, rats coming from sewers and things like that. There is a higher risk. And there was also, just as a really brief kind of input to that, is that the European Union done a non-native organism risk assessment. I think it's called Annex 8, and the risk assessment was on grey squirrels. It was done in 2014, and it's a very long document, 60-page risk assessment, I think. I think one of the questions in there was, how important is social, human health or other harm caused by organisms such as the grey squirrel? And in all of the research they'd done, it was none, low, not known. So even with that research, okay, it was 6 years ago, but things wouldn't necessarily change too much between then. So even particularly academic European Union scientists have done their research, and they can't find that there's any particular or it's a very low risk or no risk at all. Okay, so yeah, certainly more the damage to our biodiversity, the problems in our homes and the damage they cause, and sleepless nights possibly also, and the fact they're an alien species. So we'll come on to that. Okay, I think we're getting some questions coming through, so that's good. We've got 8 already. Again, like I said, I'll do that at the end. I will try, and I can't believe half an hour has gone already. That's scary. I've got a sort of 7 or 8 slides left, so we'll get through those and we'll do some questions. So the other really important thing here, I can't go into every one of these bits of legislation that are related to grey squirrels because I just don't have time, unfortunately. But there are things you can note down, take a photo with your phone or something, and just make sure you're familiar with them. But, as just a real overview, with the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, I mentioned it before with regards to the red squirrel. But basically, that's the legislation that says grey squirrels must not be released if you are to catch them alive. full stop. Whether you're a pest controller or you're a homeowner and you've caught them, or you have it in your person, in your being, then you can't release it. You have to dispatch it. So the Wildlife and Countryside Act says that. You've got the Springtrap approval order. Now they're all pretty much similar, and there obviously are some variation between countries. So whether you're in Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, or Wales, just make sure you're familiar with the Springtrap approval order, because if you're using Springtraps, you need to make sure the one you're using is authorised for squirrels. Something you might use for rats won't necessarily be authorised for use on squirrels. So you need to make sure you've got them. There's quite a few new ones that come out recently, probably a couple of years ago or so. I believe they're also on most of the Springtrap approvals, but just check it. I can't go through every single trap that's listed on there. It's for you guys to have a look, and actually be some good learning for you, and get some CPD points. If you go and have a look at any bits of these legislation, and you do a bit of research, you maybe even talk to your colleagues or technicians about it, you have a little meeting about it, that's CPD points. That's great. You're learning. That's research. With us, it's easy to register, and I think a basis prompt, if you get in touch with them, they'll help you register it. So, whichever scheme that you might be on. But yeah, the Wild Mammals Protection Act as well. This prohibits the cruel treatment of animals, but does allow legitimate pest control by humane ways. That's kind of the overview really of that legislation in relation to grey squirrels. The Animal Welfare Act, already, pretty much any mammal or animal is, comes under this legislation. We mention it quite a lot. Basically, got to be treated humanely. Doesn't matter if we need them out of there or they're causing a problem. We can't treat any animal in an inhumane way and let them suffer. Just can't do that. And the Structured and Imported Animals Act 1932. So this might be useful for some to you, but it basically says that grey squirrels may not be kept in captivity without a license. Now, you might have customers that decide to catch the squirrels alive themselves and maybe keep them. Maybe bring them up if they're kittens, bring them up. But actually, you need a license for that. It's from Natural England. So yeah, you can't do that. If you catch a squirrel alive, you've got to dispatch it as soon as is reasonably practicable. So important. Make sure you're well versed with those. I'm sure there'll be lots of other bits of legislation that could possibly relate, but these are the most important ones for you. Okay. So yeah, control options, just a few kind of reminders. Be discreet. Like I mentioned before, you're doing some work in one house, the neighbours won't necessarily be in the same mindset as your customers, that they want rid of them. They can be pretty upset about it. So make sure that doesn't happen. Consider the emotiveness of squirrel control, like I said, and get upset about it. And also your customers' concerns. So a big question is, can you catch them alive and release them? That's always a big one. Like I've explained before, absolutely not. Now, whether or not, some people might exaggerate the truth and say, oh yeah, no, possibility that I can release them, and you take them away and you actually don't, you obviously dispatch them. It really is up to you. I don't recommend, BPCA doesn't recommend that, you pull the wool over anybody's eyes, and just be honest. At the end of the day, the legislation's there. We have to follow legislation, and it is the most humane thing to do anyway. To go and release the grey squirrel that you've caught 10 miles away from where its home range was, what's it going to do? You're going to release it, and it's going to think, okay, well, I don't know where I am. I don't know where the food source is. I don't know, I said they're not particularly territorial, but they could still be a problem with that. And they're possibly going to die anyway, in a slower way. So maybe explain it to customers in that way, that it is actually more humane to dispatch them quickly and humanely. Up to you. So, and as I said, be aware of neighbours. So control, in terms of, again, proofing and habitat management, this is going to be very familiar to a lot of you that are experienced with squirrel control. But just as a quick update here, in terms of entry points, we've got, I've got my arrow here. Obviously, flat roofs, I've put an arrow here because the squirrels could jump from this tree onto this flat roof, run along, jump onto this roof, and then get access. They could get access in this small annex as well. If there's a hole or somewhere they can just get their teeth in, they can easily chew through soffits. If there's a loose tile, they could pull it up and, in they go. So, vulnerable and weak areas like soffits, if there's any damage or if there's any coming away and there's a slight hole there, if you've got a population of squirrels around, there's a chance they'll take advantage of that and get easy access. The easier it is for them, the more likely they're going to come in. But they do have the power to get through most soffits anyway if they're really eager. So it's more of assisting and trying to reduce the chance of them getting in. So this is advice you can give your customers. I mentioned before, there's not so many trees overhanging here, but there's ones over there. If they were overhanging, squirrels can jump a fair way. I think it's a good metre or two. So even if you've got trees that are half a metre or so away from a property, and they say, oh well, they're not overhanging. Well, maybe they're still a bit close anyway. So yeah, certainly trees, they take advantage of that access to maybe the higher areas of the roof. If you've got trees that are overhanging here, they can certainly jump over. And bird feeders, so this is all about proofing and habitat management. If you've got bird feeders there and you've noticed them, I've got some in my garden, but it's at the top of a very smooth pole, and squirrels, I can see them sitting there looking at the bird feeder, but they've never actually managed to get access. There is a washing line that leads to it, and I've always sort of thought, oh, that'd be interesting if I saw them kind of doing a bit of Rambo movement across there, but they never did. So but yeah, so they can't get to it. So if you want bird feeders, maybe giving them some advice on the types of ones that they could get to maybe prevent that access by squirrels, but generally maybe don't have them. Okay, how long have we got left? We're good. Okay, so option of control, there's sort of three main options, and obviously four, including that proofing and habitat management, which sometimes might actually solve a problem. If people have got squirrels in the garden and they're concerned about them running across the fence, then it might not be a decision for you to actually do any lethal control. You could, but you might say, well, actually they're not causing a problem at the minute, but let's have a look at your property and just see if some advice that I can give you to ensure that they don't come in. But if we do need to, we've got spring traps. So I mentioned before the spring trap approval order. You need to check that. It's on the Gov website. So check the traps regularly. Don't just think, oh, I've checked it once 5 years ago, so I'm okay to use the same traps. Regularly. And thinking about placement, we haven't got time to sit here and all the different scenarios and where you could put it, how you could put it, but basically you've got to think about the way the squirrel moves, haven't you? You've got to think about their path of movement and whether or not, or how likely they are to come into contact with your trap and be fed through the right way. Now this Acania trap here might not be the best photo in the world, but it just gives a good indication to what a Acania trap looks like. But you can get tunnels. So tunnels are good. There isn't one on this picture here, but you can get these sort of cage tunnels, which the squirrels, it guides them in. So if you don't want them coming from the side, not that they can here, but so many different traps, Magnum traps, Acania traps, good nature traps, probably others available that I haven't checked on the spring trap approval order recently, but there are quite a few, and you've got to select the one that's right for you depending on the environment, whether it's outside or inside. But yeah, always make sure the most important thing, as always, is always going to be humane. Humane catch, a quick kill, quick catch. You don't want the squirrel being able to put his leg in there and trying to pour out the food. You want to be able to guide it in so it goes in head first and kills it quickly. So yeah, and often, in terms of how often should you check traps? Now we have a code of best practice for spring traps. And again, some good reading for you. There's a bit in there about frequency of checking traps, and spring traps should be checked at regular intervals, is what we say, based on legislative requirements and or risk assessment compiled by the technician in charge. Now, you don't have to check them once a day. There isn't anything that says you've got to check them every 12 hours or 24 hours. And we don't tell you exactly how often you've got to check them, but you've got to decide yourself. All right, you've got to, with your skills and experience and a risk assessment you've done, you might think, I want to check that once a day. You might say it might be every couple of days. It really is up to you. We're not there to tell you what that is. You're on the site doing your assessment. So, make that assessment and make sure you record all of the follow-ups that you're doing and what you're finding and when you're finished as well. And that you're competent to use spring traps, of course. if an animal is to suffer and you unfortunately ended up in front of a judge, they'd expect you to, explain away that, that person using the trap was competent and it was just an unfortunate occurrence. Live capture trapping. So again, we have a code of practice for live capture trapping. It's, you can use them inside and outside. Again, normally if you're using things like that outside, you've got to, cover it to kind of, camouflage it, certainly from other humans and what they're seeing. So they don't like to see squirrels caught in traps, but also to encourage the squirrel to go within. And also you've got to make sure that the cage is in good condition and also placed so as not to let that captured animal suffer. And that's including the weather. So if you capture a squirrel and it's in there for 8, 9, 10 hours and it's blowing a gale and pouring it down with rain and lightning and thundering, then that's going to cause suffering, obviously. So you've got to, your placement, time of day, the time and period of time between checks is really important to consider. So the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 places no legal requirement on pest controllers to check live capture traps in terms of scale. It doesn't say anything. But, some may have been under the impression that it did, but it doesn't. However, the Animal Welfare Act and the Animal Health and Welfare in Scotland, there's one for Northern Ireland as well, but they all place a duty of care on that person who sets the trap and captures that animal. So, it can't suffer. It cannot suffer, full stop. So if you're leaving it in there for, 12 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, that's suffering, to some. And I'm certain that if you ended up again in front of a judge, that they would decide that was suffering. So you've got to, again, do an assessment. We've got some guidance in that live capture code of best practice as well. Because you need to also, for non-target animals, what if you get a small cat that goes into the trap? Or a hedgehog, or something along those lines, and you haven't checked it regularly, could be some problems there. So make that your own assessment on that. But we generally advise that it needs to be checked once a day. Okay, that's our code of practice. So, and you cannot re-release them, as we know, and they've got to be dispatched humanely. Some of you may ask the question of what's humane. How do you dispatch a squirrel humanely? It's so that it doesn't suffer. There is no legislative guidance saying how exactly you dispatch a squirrel. It is humanely. So usually we say in the industry, a swift blow to the back of the head, it's instant. So as simple as that, really, whichever you find is most humane. Okay, we're not coming to the end sort of soon, so good. We should have a good 10-15 minutes for questions. The other option is poison bait. So now, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, time just goes quickly, and you can't believe how quickly it goes. But warfarin was actually taken off of was taken off of the market. That's the word I was looking for a few years ago. It used to be for inside and outside use. We used to use it in hoppers, in trees and things like that. But that label was taken aback and taken off of market, and we didn't have the product at all, full stop, for a good 6 months or 12 months, I think it was. And then it came back in again. But it's only for inside use, so you can't use it outside anymore. It's only labelled for grey squirrels, and it's only going to be warfarin. The history around, I used to know the history around why warfarin and not other first or second generation anticoagulants. And of course, it's going to be, that's what's on the label. The label is legislation, so that's what's on the label. But also, because of the nature of squirrels and where they live and where they're most prolific in woodlands and trees, just using common sense, first generation anticoagulants are generally of less concern to other fauna. So if that squirrel is to die somewhere where we can't retrieve it, which if you're using it externally or even internally and they're dying outside, locating them can be pretty tricky, and then you may have other animals feeding on it. And first generation anticoagulants generally have a lower risk in terms of secondary poisoning, which is a very familiar thing with the crew guidance, obviously there with rats and mice. It's certainly top of the list in terms of selection. Go for a first generation if you can first, no pun intended. and then move on to second generation if that's not an option due to resistance or effectiveness and so on. So yeah, it could be, around that. I'd imagine that's the reason. But yeah, warfarin only. There's only one product available, as you see here, from Killgerm. So some of you may use it, some of you may not. It really is a decision. So spring traps, live capture traps, poison bait, and that habitat management are all good ways to deal with and use that hierarchy and select the appropriate treatment for you. And also there's dray poking. So this is more for forestry work and in woodlands, but it's a particular skill that you've got. Not all of us have done it. I've never done it before. I've been involved with people that have, and gone out and observed, but not something I've done before. But it's usually a minimum of 2 of you, normally 3 or 4, for safety reasons, and you basically poke and shoot. As you can see there with the trees in that image, it's winter. There's no leaves on the tree, which is the most preferable time of year to do it, because with leaves on the tree you can't see it as well, but also it's easier access. So you'll have one person with a very long pole poking up at the drays in the tree, waiting for the squirrels to run out, and then they'll take their shot. So of course you've got to be very experienced, very skilled with the right firearm to do this, in terms of effectiveness, but also safety. If a squirrel runs out of a nest and then straight down a tree, you don't shoot, because it's dangerous. That level, it's got to be at a certain level where you've got less risk of injury to anybody. And of course, we have got an air rifles code of best practice, not a firearms one. That's kind of out of our remit. If you have a firearms, you'll probably be aware of the relevant associations or support functions out there that can give you more, obviously, advice on that. But yeah, firearms, you've got to have a license, of course. And also in Scotland, I think with the air rifles, you've got to have a license, which is differs from England and Wales, Northern Ireland. I think so. Just as a quick reminder and summary of it, you've got to be aware of the legislation, really important. And also that when you're talking to your customers about legislation, they will be impressed. They will be more confident that you know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and that you're doing it legally and safely. And to never cause, obviously, unnecessary suffering. Not only is it against legislation and against moral standards, but social media and action groups out there, they will be more than happy to sort of get your company name out there as doing something that was inhumane, and it can cause you all sorts of problems, not just legally and professionally, but in terms of reputation as well. So site-specific approach, if you say, oh, Natalie, what treatment do you think is best? Don't know. It really is site-specific. So, make sure you make that decision. Happy to, if anyone wants to give us a call and have a chat about, give us a, scenario-based description of what's going on, and we can have a chat about what we think would be most appropriate with you. But ultimately, it's always your decision. And manage your customers' expectations, really, really important with anything. This isn't just with squirrels, any pest, manage your customers' expectations. I probably have that statement in every single webinar that we do, because if you do that, your customer will be happy. And that's what you want. If you own a business, you want that. If you're a technician, I was a technician down in the southeast, and okay, it's my company's name on my shirt, but it was my face they were seeing. It was my work that I was doing for them. It was me that they were looking at to solve their problem for them. So, really important that I, manage their expectations and got the problem solved for them, because it's me ultimately as well that has got the reputation to sustain. So, I think we got through a good amount there. We've got 10 minutes left, and that's good because we have 20. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. I think, hopefully, I can keep my phone on. I've got 2 screens at the minute, so I'm hoping I've unshared. You should just be able to see me now and nothing else. My colleague Kat will let me know if there's a massive issue. Yeah, sorry everyone calling me Karen. I for some reason I normally change the name before I come in, but I completely forgot. And once I got the webinar started, it just didn't let me. Kat says no, we're all looking good. Right, okay, 21 questions. Okay, so hello Natalie. This was quite early on, so there's a possibility we've answered this anyway. So Okay, it's a question about technical inspector exam from Galaxy J6. Get in touch with the office, they'll speak to you about the exams and training that we have. I won't be able to cover it on this webinar because we're limited with time, so give them a call. Okay, so yeah, again, like I mentioned in the beginning, that I do the questions at the end, and it's maybe important for you to note down those questions because there's a good chance I'll cover it anyway. And one of these questions here about average litter size, again, 5 is roughly the average litter size, or the kittens that might be there can vary, of course. So okay, we've just got a hi there. So okay, actually there might not be as many questions as I thought. There's a few people saying about lost sound. Hopefully that came back. I couldn't see any more comments after that, but I think we've gone okay. Do red squirrels have the same biology as grey squirrels? So I did actually miss out one important thing, actually. Thank you, Stuart Reed, for reminding me. Is not so much I want to go into the biology of the red squirrel. It is very similar, but one massive difference and why the importance of control of grey squirrels, which is probably up there with one of the most important reasons, so apologies I missed that out, is that the squirrel pox. So grey squirrels carry squirrel pox to a degree. I'm not saying every single one is carrying it, but they can carry it without any effects or very little effects to them, whereas red squirrels are very, very susceptible to squirrel pox, and it will kill them. And that's another reason. Not only are grey squirrels tougher and compete with food sources a lot better than reds, but they can pass on this squirrel pox that they are unaffected by, but the red squirrels are hugely affected by, and it can and can kill them and affect all sorts of things. So yeah, that's a really important bit there, Stuart, that you just reminded me to mention. Is it true that some places, i.e. country estates, are using a contraceptive method for control, or is it a wind up? Now, Kevin, actually, so no, not the moment, but there are trials going on, I believe. That I was a few weeks ago reading some sort of scientific documents or studies and research that they've done, and one of them was on a contraceptive method. I didn't actually read fully into it, and I wish I had done now, because I probably would have better answer that question with a lot more detail. But I think there's some tests going on, and possibly it's in the country estates where they've got a bit more control over the environment. Country estates generally being particularly large and one person or one company owning it, so then they can have that better access to a larger population of grey squirrels. But yeah, it's out there, obviously not available to us, but could be something that may be. But at the moment, don't worry about that too much, because it's not something that we've got. If anybody feels differently, please put a question on here as a statement that you've heard different. That would be great. So yeah, Daniel Doherty. So what, if any, remedial repair could be carried out to a damaged tree like the one in your picture? Nothing. That's the unfortunate thing, Daniel, is that it's irreparable damage. They can't, I mean, I'm not a horticulturalist. I don't know a lot about tree, but I remember when we met with the European Squirrel Initiative down, I can't remember the name of the forest, I'm really sorry, but it's Northamptonshire way. There's irreparable damage. Even the smallest scraping, even the smallest test scrape that they can do to try and find this sweet sugary sap that they want, and they don't find it, so move on. Even that can, irreparably damage a tree. It won't necessarily kill it, but it'll certainly, reduce its growth, reduce its, production of, food sources, and also if any timber that we might use from trees will be affected and, be downgraded. So yeah, it's irreparable. Okay, so from Paul here. It shows illegal to release an imported species. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sense of the question. Terrapins, illegal to release imported species, squirrel, terrapin, mink, once it's caught, and you would be liable for prosecution, but you can release 35 million pheasants into the countryside. That's okay. It's, we're strange, aren't we, humans? We come up with our own rules, and, they make sense in many ways, but in other ways they maybe don't. But yeah, it's illegal to release the grey squirrel because it's an alien invasive species. Has your much experience success with the WCS trap, tube spring trap? I haven't had a lot of action with that, because I probably stopped using, trapping, I don't know, when I joined the BPCA, oh God, 7 years ago, because of course we don't do the work now. You know, we come out with you guys sometimes and talk about them and go to manufacturers, but and the WCS tube, I don't think was actually available when I was using the spring traps, but lots of people use them. They definitely use them. They definitely work well. You know, you place them correctly. You know, they're going to work well for you. So any spring trap will. You select the right one for the right situation that you're in. We used to use magnum traps sometimes in cages, you know, things like that. And they were, you know, these things you kind of pull apart, almost like bear traps on a smaller scale. They were, you know, I used to like using them because it made me feel tough, you know, silly, didn't really. But yeah, you know, any trap is going to be effective if you're using it in the right way. Good, we've got 5 minutes left. How many questions we've got? Oh, yeah, we've got sort of 24 questions. Now, I guarantee you I will not be able to get through all of your questions. There's quite a few of them, so what I'll do afterwards is I'll get a printout of the questions from a colleague of mine. I'll go through and type the answers underneath, and we'll send it out in a document for you to view. So if you've got a question I don't get to, then you can expect that hopefully within the week, maybe early next week, and you'll get your answers there. And for those of you that haven't put a question in, you know, it might be useful reading to you. So how would you deal with a nest within a flat roof void? Could glue traps be used if not left unattended? No, glue traps can't be used. They're for rats and mice only. That's what they're intended for. So no, don't use glue traps for squirrels. So I see what you mean, in a flat roof void where, you know, access is very difficult, and it can be an issue with that. And in some situations, you know, I've known people, if it's not causing too much of an issue, they wait for them to move out themselves, or before, if you know they haven't got a litter, when they move out of the attic space, proofing it up. But they can be difficult. Access is difficult, but if need be, they're going to have to give you access. They're going to have to cut a hole that allows you to get access to it. You know, it's a bit like if you've got rats coming from sewers and there's a damaged pipe under the foundations that needs fixing, they're going to have to fix it. Or if you can't, you know, you need access into a floor void to try and figure out where something's coming from, they've got to get you access. You know, it's the same thing with, you know, if you've got a tricky flat roof void area that you can't really access, then they're going to have to get you access. And then you take it from there. And it might be the fact that you use something like warfarin, you know, with the poison internally, because, you know, there's a good possibility you can actually get that in there better. So that's what I would say. Either, you know, something you can put in a tray that's smaller, like warfarin, or cut a hole for you. You know, they got to take some responsibility of it and work with you. So colleagues have reported. Does launching? I can't. Sorry, it's anonymous. I couldn't read your question. Colleagues have reported. I'm not sure what that question is. Sorry, anonymous. I don't even know what your name is, but I can't read that question. So if you want to put it back on again, I'll try and get to it later. Okay, so Vincent Dunn. I'm very new to the pest control job, as I'm now only just doing my exams. Well done, good luck. But I've always hunted and trapped, as it's the way I've been raised. Can you tell me where I stand in shooting squirrels with my catapult or steel or lead shots, as I find it a very effective method in controlling them? You know, dispatch is humane. You know, I don't think you're going to find anything apart from, you've got the Wild Mammals Act and the Wildlife and Countryside Act. So have a look at those two bits of legislation. Those two bits of legislation will tell you what you can and can't do in terms of, you know, dispatch. So you can't drown animals, you know, you can't blow them up, you know, you can't I think impale them. You know, there's various different things. So, and I'm pretty sure, you know, catapult's not mentioned, you know, as long as you're killing them humanely. That's going to be the important thing. If you don't, then there could be problems if someone sees you. So I wouldn't advise it. It's not something BPCA supports. You know, it's not something we would give advice on or support it. But if it's humane and it's in a way that, you know, is effective, and you're certain it's effective and humane, then you know, you could control them, of course. Okay, I'm going to do one more question, and then we are going to have to move on and let you guys get on for the rest of the day. So, do BPCA encourage the shooting community, this is from Simon, shooting community to organise eradication programmes as far as will ever be, do BPCA encourage the shooting community to organise eradication programmes as far as this will ever be possible. Although we don't encourage it. I mean, it's not, we only encourage pest management where it's needed, and that's up to you or your customers or the forestry commissions to decide where it's needed. And also that European Squirrel Initiative organisation I mentioned, they'd be good people for you to speak to, because they certainly have that approach to grey squirrel control. They feel they need to be more proactive and more aggressive with it to try and reduce the numbers, because they're just becoming out of control. So have a look at that, Simon. The European Squirrel Initiative, that's a really good place to go and have a look. Okay. Really sorry, I've got 24 questions left still, but I promise I will get those on a spreadsheet. I'll get some answers on there, and I'll get a colleague to send it out to you all. And then again, if you have any more questions, you can reply to that email that comes in with the questions. I'm learning all the time as well. You guys might ask me things that I think, oh yeah, I need to go and have a look at that and remind myself of that, or a new bit of information. So please do. Thank you very much. We're 1 minute over. I'm going to let you all get off. And yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today. And yeah, have a great day and be safe.